My daughter-in-law said Christmas was canceled because we were too broke, so I spent the night alone. But that same night, I saw a live stream champagne, a packed house, and my own son was there. I said nothing until the next morning, when she asked me for $2,500, and for the first time, I decided to stop paying and start showing everything. Christmas is canceled this year, Diane. We're flat broke. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, said it without even looking me in the eye. She was sitting in my kitchen in Seattle, scrolling on her iPhone and sipping the latte I'd just paid for. My son, Leo, was staring at his shoes. Inflation, Mom. The rent hike. We just have to tighten our belts this year, he mumbled. I looked at the two of them. I'm 68 years old, a widow for 10 years, and I've learned to read between the lines. When someone like Sarah says they're broke, they usually mean something else entirely. I just nodded calmly. I understand, I said. No guilt trips, no tears. I didn't ask why she was wearing brand new designer boots. I didn't offer to pay for the dinner like I always did. I just watched. They looked relieved, almost victorious. They thought they'd checked a bothersome chore off their list, hosting the old mother for the holidays. So on December 24th, I sat alone in my apartment. It wasn't sad. It was peaceful. I heated up a bowl of soup, opened a nice bottle of wine, and enjoyed the quiet. But around 8 p.m., my tablet buzzed. An Instagram notification. Sarah's mom is live. I clicked it more out of habit than curiosity. What I saw made my spoon freeze midair. Sarah's parents' living room was glowing. Expensive decorations everywhere. A DJ was playing music in the background. I saw Leo laughing with a glass of champagne. I saw Sarah carrying a massive platter of lobster and prime rib to the table. The house was packed. Relatives, friends, neighbors. Everyone was there. Only the seat where I usually sat was empty. There was no financial crisis. It was a conscious choice to phase me out. I turned off the tablet, finished my wine, and went to bed. I wasn't angry. I was wide awake, because I knew something they had forgotten in their celebration. I woke up the next morning before my alarm. My phone was blinking. A message from Leo, no, from Sarah. Merry Christmas, Diane. Hope you had a quiet night. Hey, listen, could you wire us that $2,500 for the rent gap today? The landlord draws tomorrow, and we're really short because of the utility bills. Not a word about the party. No apology. Just a demand written like an automated invoice. I sat on the edge of the bed and read the message 3 times. To them, I was just a bank with a heartbeat. In their eyes, I was the woman who paid so they could party while I stayed out in the cold. But they had forgotten one thing. I am a woman of numbers, not just feelings. I opened my online banking. There they were, the recurring transfers from the last 3 years. $450 a month for Leo's car lease because he was between jobs. $600 for the gym memberships and subscriptions that ran on my credit card. The security deposit for their new apartment, which I'd given as a loan, that never saw a dime of repayment. Altogether, I had pumped over $40,000 into their lives while they treated me like an unloved prop. I typed a reply. It was short. Delete my number. I don't fund liars. I hit send. Then I blocked Sarah. I didn't block Leo, but I muted his profile. I didn't want to argue. I wanted to act. My first move wasn't to the phone, but to my desk. I pulled out the thick folder labeled Real Estate and Finance. The building they lived in was officially owned by a management company, but I held the majority shares. I had never told them I was the owner. I didn't want Leo to feel beholden to me. I had kept their rent artificially low for years. That changed today. I didn't call a lawyer. I called the property manager, an old friend of my late husband. Eric, I said calmly, please adjust the rent for Unit 4B to current market value effective immediately. No more family discounts. Eric was quiet for a second. Are you sure, Diane? That's nearly a 60% jump for Leo. I looked out the window at the gray Seattle sky. I'm positive, Eric. If they can afford lobster and a DJ, they can afford fair market rent. I hung up. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like a correction. Balance was being restored. Next, I went through my credit card statements. I canceled the authorized user cards I'd set up for emergencies. I canceled the shared family streaming plans and the cloud storage where Sarah saved all her influencer photos. I removed my bank info from their food delivery accounts. Small clicks, but each one was a thread I was pulling out of their safety net. Around noon, the calls started. Leo tried first. I let it ring. Then a text came. Mom, what's going on? Sarah's card was declined at the grocery store. Did you lock the account? We need that rent money urgently. I didn't answer. Instead, I went downtown. I bought myself a new wool coat I'd wanted for a long time and sat in a cozy cafe. While there, I saw Sarah's latest story. A black background with white text. Some people only show their true colors when you need help. Disappointed by family. I almost smiled. She was trying to flip the narrative, painting me as the bitter, stingy mother. She didn't know I already had the screenshot of her Christmas live stream saved and backed up. I went back home and started packing. Not to run away, but to travel. I'd wanted to go on a cruise for years, but Leo always said I needed to be available in case something happened with the apartment or the car. I wasn't available anymore. I booked the trip for next week. Just as I confirmed the booking, my doorbell rang. It wasn't Leo. It was Sarah's mother, Brenda. She looked indignant. Diane, we need to talk. What you're doing to those kids is a total low blow. I opened the door only a crack. I didn't invite Brenda in. Good afternoon, Brenda, I said pleasantly. What brings you by? Brenda huffed. Leo is a wreck. Sarah's been crying all morning. You cut them off without a single warning. On Christmas. Do you have a heart? They're having financial trouble, you know that. I leaned against the door frame. Financial trouble. That's strange. Yesterday, your living room looked like a ballroom on that live stream. Champagne, catering, a DJ. I'm sure that cost more than the $2,500 they begged me for this morning. Brenda turned pale. That? That was private. We paid for that. It has nothing to do with Leo. Good, I countered. Then you can take over their rent and car lease too. I've decided to retire, financially as well. Brenda started to say something, but I held up my hand. I'm not angry, Brenda. I'm just done with the sponsorship. If they're adult enough for parties like that, they're adult enough for their own bills. I closed the door before she could respond. My heart was thumping, but not from fear. It was the thrill of freedom. I deleted the DoorDash app from my phone. It was the final digital tie. Later that night, an email arrived from Leo. Subject: why are you doing this to us? He wrote that I was misunderstanding everything. The party was spontaneous. They didn't invite me because they thought I was tired and wanted peace and quiet. It was classic gaslighting, trying to mask cruelty as concern. I replied with a single attachment, a PDF spreadsheet of every payment I'd made over the last 36 months. At the bottom was the total $42,316. Underneath, I wrote, that was my concern. From now on, you'll have to look after yourselves. I shut my laptop. In that moment, I realized I hadn't taken a breath that deep in years. Tomorrow, I'd have the locks changed, just in case Leo still had his old emergency key. The locksmith arrived at 9 sharp. It took 20 minutes, and then I had a new set of keys in my hand. It was a small act, but it felt final. As he was leaving, I saw Leo's car pull onto the street. It was the car I paid for every month. He got out looking exhausted and walked toward my door. I waited behind the window. He tried his key. When he realized it didn't fit, he hit the buzzer long and aggressive. I opened the upstairs window. "I'm not letting you in, Leo," I called down. He looked up, his face flushed. "Mom, what is this crap with the locks? We need to talk." The dealership called. The payment didn't go through. "I revoked the auto pay," I said calmly. "You have 2 choices. Either you take over the contract yourself or you return the car tomorrow. I'm not paying for another mile." Leo almost screamed, "I need that car for work. Do you want me to lose my job?" I looked at him and felt a strange kind of pity. Not because he was in trouble, but because he truly believed his problems were my responsibility. "You looked very happy on Sarah's Instagram last night," I said. "Use that energy to find a solution. And Leo, if you harass me at my door again, I'll have the building management file a report." He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Then he got in the car and peeled away tires, screeching. I closed the window. My phone vibrated. A bank notification, alert monthly rent deposit for Unit 4B, failed. The manager had requested the new rent and Leo's account clearly couldn't cover it. Normally, I would have panicked and wired the money to avoid trouble. Today, I grabbed a book and sat in the sunlight streaming through my window. I had a list. Every access point they had to my life was severed. But there was one more thing, the college fund for my future grandchild. Sarah had always insisted how important that was. I looked at the balance. It was my money. There was no grandchild yet. I closed the account and moved the funds into my travel savings. If they only defined family by the money, then they didn't have a family anymore. 2 days before my trip, I got a call from my sister Joan. "Diane, what on earth is happening? Brenda is telling everyone you're throwing Leo out on the street and trying to ruin him. She's saying you've had some kind of breakdown since Bill passed away." I took a deep breath. This was Sarah's strategy. When you lose control of the finances, you try to destroy the person's reputation. "Joan," I said quietly, "did you see the live stream from Christmas Eve?" I sent her the video I'd saved. Then I sent her the spreadsheet with the $42,000. It was silent on the other end for a long time. "Oh my God," Joan finally whispered. "They were partying while telling you they couldn't afford a holiday dinner with you." "Exactly," I said. "And now that I stopped paying the bills, I'm unstable." Joan was horrified. "In my family, truth is a currency that isn't used often, but when it's laid on the table, it changes everything." Within hours, the tide turned. Joan told her daughter, who told the other cousins. Poor Sarah, who was playing the victim online, suddenly found people asking questions. Under her latest post about toxic family members, a cousin commented, "Toxic is drinking champagne while your mother pays your rent and sits at home alone." Sarah deleted the comment instantly, but the damage was done. Leo sent me one last email. "You ruined everything. Sarah wants a trial separation because we can't afford the apartment anymore. Are you happy now?" I read the message in the back of a Lyft on the way to the airport. Was I happy? No. But I felt light. Leo was blaming me for Sarah's reaction. He still didn't understand that the problem wasn't my missing money. It was Sarah's missing loyalty the moment the luxury vanished. I didn't reply. When I checked in at the airport, I felt like a different woman. I wasn't the helpful grandma in the background anymore. I was Diane, the woman who had bought her own life back. On the plane, I switched my phone to airplane mode. For the next 2 weeks, there would be no texts, no demands, and no lies. Just the ocean and me. The cruise wasn't an escape. It was a detox. As the ship cut through the Caribbean, I spent a lot of time just staring at the horizon. Without the constant noise of my son's problems in my ears, I started to remember who I was before Leo and Sarah. I was a woman who loved to laugh, who loved to read, and who used to be very good at setting priorities. I had spoiled Leo too much. My late husband Bill always said, "Diane, you're feeding the birds so long it's going to forget how to fly." He had been right. By solving every crisis with my checkbook, I had raised a cripple. On the 5th day of the trip, I turned on the Wi-Fi for a moment at a port in Cozumel, just to see if the world was still turning. I had 24 missed calls from an unknown number, and a voicemail from Brenda. Her voice wasn't aggressive anymore. It was panicked. "Diane, please, we have to find a solution. The landlord sent Leo an eviction notice because he didn't pay the increased rent and the deposit. Well, Leo says you never officially signed it over as a gift. He has to be out in 60 days. Where are they supposed to go?" I listened to it twice. In the past, I would have burst into tears and called the manager. Today, I felt nothing but cold logic. They had 60 days. That was plenty of time to find a smaller place. Just like everyone else, I typed a quick email to Eric, the manager. "Eric, stay firm. No payment plans, no rolling back the rent increase. If they move out, renovate the unit and list it at the new rate." Then I turned the phone back off. I went to dinner and ordered the best steak on the menu. I sat at a table with an older couple from Chicago. We talked about art and travel. Not once did I mention my kids. I enjoyed just being a person, not a source of income. I realized that Leo's panic wasn't my panic. He was 35 years old. It was time he learned how to read a lease and how to budget his money. If Sarah wanted to leave him because he couldn't fund a lifestyle he didn't earn, then that was a lesson about love he should have learned years ago. When I got back to Seattle after 2 weeks, my apartment was as peaceful as I'd left it. No Leo at the door, no angry letters in the box. Just an official notice from the management company. Confirmation of lease termination for Unit 4B at the end of the quarter. They were giving up. Or rather, they realized there was nothing left to squeeze out of me. I unpacked my bags and made a cup of tea. There was a soft knock at the door. This time, I looked through the peephole. It was Leo. He wasn't wearing his expensive jacket anymore. He looked unkempt. I opened the door, but kept the security chain engaged. "I don't want money, Mom," he said immediately. His voice sounded hollow. "I just want to know, why couldn't you have warned us? We're losing everything." I looked at him. "Leo, I've been warning you for 3 years. Every time I asked when you'd pay back the loan. Every time I said I needed my savings for my own retirement. You just weren't listening because the music at your parties was too loud." He lowered his head. "Sarah's gone. She moved back in with her parents. She says she can't live in a dump." I nodded. "That's sad, Leo. But at least now you know what her love was worth. It was tied to my bank account." Leo cried quietly. "What am I supposed to do now?" "What every adult does," I said. "Find a job that covers your bills. Find an apartment you can actually afford. And start being honest, mostly with yourself." He didn't ask for the key. He didn't ask for a wire transfer. He just stood there. I handed him a tissue through the crack in the door. "I love you, Leo, but I'm not carrying your life for you anymore. That's the biggest gift I have left to give you." I closed the door. This time, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a conclusion. I went into my living room and looked at the photos from my trip. I had new plans. I wanted to take a cooking class, maybe join a hiking group. My money was mine. My time was mine. And my love. that was only available for respect from now on, not for receipts. Spring in Seattle was beautiful. I had restructured my life. Once a week, I went for walks with Joan. I signed up for a pottery class where people just knew me as Diane. It was refreshing. Leo reached out every couple of weeks. The messages were short. Found a one-bedroom. Working full-time in sales now. I always replied kindly, but kept my distance. I didn't offer to help him move. I didn't buy furniture for his new place. One day, he sent me a photo of his first home-cooked meal in the new apartment. It was just pasta with red sauce. "Tastes better than that lobster did," he wrote. I smiled. Maybe there was hope for him after all. Sarah, on the other hand, had vanished completely from my orbit. Brenda tried to message me on Facebook once about reclaiming the security deposit, but I blocked her instantly. I'd learned that you don't need to have a conversation with people who only communicate in demands. My lawyer, whom I'd eventually consulted just to make sure everything was legally airtight, confirmed that all the gifts and loans were well documented. There was no legal ground for them to stand on. The financial exploitation, as he called it, was over. One Saturday morning, I was sitting in a cafe reading the paper. A young woman at the next table was arguing with her boyfriend on the phone about money. She sounded desperate. She wanted to cover his rent even though she barely had anything herself. I looked at her and saw my younger self. I went over to her after she hung up. "Excuse me," I said gently. "I happened to overhear. May I give you a piece of advice?" She looked at me surprised. "Love doesn't require you to keep your wallet open," I said. "Someone who truly loves you doesn't want to watch you drown for them." She stared at me, then slowly nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. I paid for my coffee and left. It felt good to pass that lesson on. I wasn't the woman who suffered in silence anymore. I was the woman who had found her voice. And that voice said no, very clearly when it needed to. A year had passed. Another Christmas Eve was around the corner. This time, there was no live stream, no false promises, and no eating soup alone. I had invited Leo over, but on my terms. No gifts over $20. Everyone brings a dish. And we don't talk about debts or the past. He agreed immediately. When he knocked on my door, he was wearing a simple coat and carrying a homemade pie. He looked healthier, more grounded. We sat in my living room, which was only lightly decorated. We talked about his job and my plans for a trip to Italy in the spring. "Mom," he said at one point, sipping his tea. "I wanted to apologize, not just about the money, but because I let you feel invisible in your own family." I put my hand on his. "I'm not invisible anymore, Leo. I've learned that you have to draw boundaries so that love has room to breathe." It wasn't a perfect holiday, but it was real. There was no champagne and no DJ, but there was a conversation that wasn't built on lies. Later, after he'd left, I sat alone in front of my small tree. My phone blinked. A message from an unknown number. It was a photo of Sarah. She was sitting in a luxury restaurant, champagne glass in hand, next to an older man. I didn't feel a sting, no regret. I simply deleted the message and the number. Sarah was still looking for someone to fund her dreams, but that someone wasn't me anymore. And it wasn't my son. I turned off the tree lights. The apartment was warm, the bills were paid, and my heart was light. Christmas hadn't been canceled. It was finally back to what it was supposed to be, a celebration of the truth. I went to bed, looking forward to the next morning. A morning where no one wanted money from me. A morning where I was simply Diane. And that was the most valuable gift I'd ever given myself. Not everyone changes when you explain things to them, but almost everyone reacts when you stop paying for them.